Hello, Year 9. Nice to, I say see you again. But in fact, just put the little note in case you haven't read it on Show My Homework. But I'm hoping to find out tomorrow, which is Tuesday when I'm recording this, whether or not I'll be able to do a live lesson on Friday. So be ready for Friday to be ready for English at a normal time in front of a computer screen, because it's very likely that I'm going to be able to do a live lesson for you at that point. And of course, that means if it's a live lesson, you need to be there because it's live and happening at that moment. So I just thought I'd say that quickly. Not guaranteed, but feeling pretty confident about it. So here we are with today's lesson. Then there's a couple tasks coming up later. A little bit of something creative today is what I've gone for. But as it says there on the screen, in fact, make that your title again for me, Unseen Poetry. And I've just put the question there, why do you have to study it? That's a question I throw out there as a class for discussion, but we haven't got that today. So instead, let's just put some points on the screen there for you. I just wanted you to realise the reason you're given unseen poetry in your GCSE exam is because it shows your ability to firstly think on your feet, because it's something you definitely won't have seen. It's not something you can go home and revise for easily. So it's testing your ability, like raw ability, not your prepared, I've been revising for hours ability. Test your ability to deal with something you haven't studied, which is what I just pretty much said. Your ability to show you can understand someone else's point of view and ideas. That is why you study poetry at all, because it shows that you're able to look at something and actually empathise with it, to actually put yourself in someone else's shoes, which is a really important life skill and a really important skill of being human. And finally, deal with figurative language. When people say literally, and something is literally, it is what it is. Figurative is the opposite of that, when something is metaphorical, when things represent other things. So poetry is very figurative. It's not very literal. So that's what that one is. So there you go, just some things. And I wanted to recap this quickly as well. These are some of the steps to do with unseen poetry that I've been going through with you. So things that you need to do in the order you need to do them, just thought I'd point those out. We haven't got to do too much of that today, but step 1 is read the poem, highlighting anything that leaps out at you. Step 2 is looking at the title and its connotations. And then can you work out any of the messages? 3 is then choosing 3 bits or 3 lines and labelling what the methods are. So like there's a simile there, or there's a powerful verb there, or that's some really dark imagery, and actually labelling that on your copy of the poem. And finally, step 4, putting your answer together. But we haven't got to worry about that too much today. Something slightly different coming up. So I'm going to introduce you to this man who you have not literally met before, but figuratively have met before. Simon Armitage. He's the one who wrote Remains, which is one of the poems you studied and that little anthology you did when you were in class with me earlier in the year. You study his poem for your GCSE. He's been around for quite a while. I studied his poetry when I was at school as well, but a different poem to you. So he's British, as it says there, lives in Yorkshire, is where he's born. His poetry deals with a variety of topics and themes. There's more down there on the screen, but he's very very dry in its delivery, by which I mean it's almost very straightforward, and there's not a lot of necessarily it's sort of dry humour is where there's humour, but it's not necessarily laugh out loud humour, and that's what you call dry humour. And sometimes it can be very dark as well, which is what you're going to see in today's poem. Today's poem is one that I actually studied at school, and I really like it, and I'm going to get you to mirror it in your own writing shortly. So let's have a look at this one then. It looks something like this. It's untitled, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the poem in a minute. Pay attention. At the end of this lesson, you are going to be doing a little bit of poetry writing in the same sort of style as this. Now, some of you are instantly going to start panicking and everything like that. Don't. Because as you'll see, this isn't one of those rhyme poems. It hasn't got a particular structure to follow. So yours can be very much like this. I'm going to use the word later. It's very confessional, as in it's about a confession of something that happened to him when he was maybe 13 years old. So let's read it together. I am very bothered when I think of the bad things I have done in my life, not least that time in the chemistry lab when I held a pair of scissors by the blades and played the handles in the naked lilac flame of the Bunsen burner, then called your name and handed them over. Oh, the unrivalled stench of branded skin as you slipped your thumb and middle finger in, then couldn't shake off the 2 burning rings, marked, the doctor said, for eternity. Don't believe me, please, if I say that was just my buttered-fingered way, at 13, of asking you if you would marry me. Now, you don't have to love that poem. What's it about in simple terms? Again, because I can't ask you as a class, I'll tell you. You've got this 13-year-old in school. They've got the Bunsen burner on, like in the picture there. But what he's doing, he's holding a pair of scissors, but by the blades, so the handles are facing away from his hand. And he's putting those metal handles, so not plastic, the metal ones, into the Bunsen burner flame, and they're getting hotter and hotter. And then he hands them over to this person. Now, we don't know if it's a boy or a girl, but somebody he clearly likes. He hands it over to them, and they go to put their fingers into the scissors, as you would, and then they get burnt. Branded, in fact, as the word would be as well, marked. The two words that are used there. And it's almost like they're marked with rings. Like rings, what they symbolize when you have marriage, ring is a sign of love. The reason a ring is that as well, because it goes round, it's unbroken. A circle hasn't got an end to it, so it goes round and round. So eternity is the word that's mentioned there as well, and eternity is it goes on forever. Well, that's what a ring does. So he's done that, and it's a very schoolboy way, as he says near the end, my butterfingered. Butterfingers is like clumsy. It's a cricket term often when someone can't catch a ball. You're very buttered fingered, like it slips off. So buttered fingered, my clumsy way of 13 and asking you if you would marry me. I mean, I like that poem because it's straightforward in its structure, in the sense of there isn't any particular rhyme, although there are in places. I've got my little highlight cursor here, so like over here, the unrivaled stench of branded skin as you slipped your thumb and middle finger in, then couldn't shake off the two burning rings. You've got this sort of loose rhyme going on here, which is what makes this a poem, because otherwise it just looks like a series of lines in an event. But again, we've got that down here. Don't believe me, please, if I say that was just my buttered fingered way at 13. So he breaks the conventions by actually having rhyme, but not necessarily at the end of rhymes, because he's thrown this at 13, which is there deliberately. If we were studying this, might go into a little bit more detail, asking why he does that. But I'm not going to too much at the minute. We're just going to look at this poem and use it as inspiration for our own writing very shortly. Key things to maybe talk about, it's sort of a little bit saucy in its language maybe, this naked lilac flame. You do call it a naked flame when it's got no covering over it like this one here, but naked, it's got these sort of connotations, maybe of romance, or maybe of love, or maybe of something else. But then we've got real mixed imagery as well. We've got this sort of this idea of love down here, eternity and rings and all of these images to do with like marrying somebody. Yet we've also got this, oh, the unrivaled stench of branded skin. Unrivaled, if someone's got a rival, it's got a competitor, there's nothing like it. The unrivaled stench. Stench is a really sort of strong word for something you don't like the smell of. Branded, we talked about earlier, and skin. And then there's this oh as well. It almost makes it very poetic, like it's very old-fashioned. Oh, the indignity. Oh, my dear. Oh, help me. It's trying to be very dramatic. So there you go. There's a few things to talk about the poem, because here you go. Task number 1, everybody, is this. So I've got some more Viper's Cave stuff going on here for you. Only 4 questions, so it shouldn't take you too long. But in a moment, you're going to want to pause this video once I've gone through these and write down your answers on the page, please. So number 1, I want you to retrieve what is it the speaker heats up in the flames. 2 is an inference. You're going to have to work this one out. How does the speaker feel towards, I called them the victim, because they've been burnt, but they're the person that this speaker and the person, we don't know if it's Simon Armitage, so the person writing the poem, speaking, how do they feel towards the victim? And please just make that more than 2 or 3 words. Vocabulary, I want you to write down a word that suggests young love and one that seems unpleasant, and write me down 3 connotations of each. So if you chose the word branded, so branded, what does it make you think of? And try and come up with 3 connotations. So you could write the word on your page and have arrows coming off of it. And finally, number 4, what do you think the message of the poem is? Or let me rephrase that slightly. What do you think the writer is trying to show us about the person speaking? What are we learning? Maybe about love and what sort of forms that love can take. Anyway, pause this video now, and I should have just enough time to explain task 2. Have a go at task 1 right now for me, and I'm going quiet for a few seconds. And that's me quiet. Done. You should have done task 1. So let's move on then, and I want a photo of that page, please, so I can see what you wrote. You are going to become a poet. I'm going to talk this through quite quickly. Please don't panic. You're going to be using Simon Armitage's style and some of his lines to create your own confessional poem. Look at the blue box. Poems have rhythm and flow. That's what makes them poems and not like blocks of writing. So they don't need to rhyme is the first thing. If you try and make it rhyme, you're probably going to find it harder. As I put here, as I did, you'll see in a minute, let the words pour out of you. Don't overthink what you're writing. Just aim to choose a few descriptive words in a few of the lines to make it a bit poetic, as you'll see with mine. So what you need to do, Year 9, is choose an event that you're embarrassed about from your life. Ideally a school event, but make sure it's something you can share with me, because we don't have anything too, inappropriate going on here. So I've put in the yellow box here, which you can come back to because I've uploaded these slides. These are some lines you could try in your poems. You don't have to, but here is my example, because this might give you an idea of what I'm looking for. And I just wrote this, but before I show you, it doesn't just come out perfectly. I had to edit this quite a bit, and it really made me think of how I wanted it to sound. So when you come to yours, I'd like there to be a neat final version, but I really would expect to see a rough version in your books as well. This lesson is quite short, but it's because I've given you plenty of time to try and write your poem. Mr. Johnson's real example. This happened to me when I was year 11. I'll tell you the story, then you can hear the poem. We were coming back from PE, a load of us, being a bit too loud as you were. We're going through some doors. They're the old sort of doors where they were wooden, and they had two big blocks of glass in them with like the wire inside of it to stop it like shattering, going everywhere. As we were coming up to it, I was the first one there. Instead of pushing the door open, I kicked it open, but I kicked it on the glass and it shattered, and I felt so embarrassed, and I had to go tell the head teacher. I got sent to the head teacher to tell him what I'd done, and honestly it was the worst thing I ever remember, feeling so embarrassed. So here's my poem about that event. I've underlined some of the bits that you might want to copy to make yours. I am very bothered when I think of the bad things I have done in my life, not least the time when we returned from the football field, full of laughter and pretend masculinity, because I think that's what year 11 boys are like. Our boisterous shouts and pushes echoing down corridors, our boisterous words and insults thrown at each other. We approached the changing rooms, that pit of teenage odour and cheap deodorant. Ahead of me, the doors were shut, but it wasn't my hands I used to open them, but my foot that I planted on the panes with power. That saw the sudden shattering spread across the pane, a spider's web of splintered guilt. Oh, I will never forget the rush of blood to my cheeks as I stood there before the headmaster, confessing my crime, my clumsy showing off to my friends, my wish that I could rewind those few seconds and make another choice. The guilt that meant I would never act the clown again, which is an expression for like being stupid and drawing attention to yourself. Things I'd point out about this is a poem because of the way the lines are laid out, the way I've sort of phrased things. Like, full of laughter, our boisterous shouts and pushes echoing down corridors, not echoing all down the long corridors. It's sort of written in a shorter way, but I'm choosing my words more carefully. I used loads of alliteration deliberately. Like, I tried to use the strong sound here, like when I broke the glass, I've got a strong sound, but I also use the sibilants here, like the sudden shattering spread across the pane. Those were deliberate decisions. As I was writing, I tried to think about using those sorts of sounds. Like, this is imagery, a spider's web of splintered guilt, because the way the glass breaks, it sort of has lines going off everywhere, a bit like the lines in a spider's web. And then I called it splintered guilt rather than like a spider's web of broken glass, because the glass represented my guilt. Other things, like I tried to use the C sounds here, the confessing my crime. And otherwise, it was just sort of like just the way I described the changing rooms. I was just trying to think about describing things differently. Again, I don't want to see people giving me 5 lines for this. In fact, what I'd like to see is to make sure you've listened to this properly all the way through. I would like you to draw me, please. Oh, what can I get you to draw quickly because I'm running out of time? I'd like you to draw me a box, and you could draw something coming out of the box. Okay, a jack in the box or a box with a question mark above it, and the key word there is mystery. So you write the word mystery at the top of your page and draw a box with a question mark or a jack in the box. What was I saying? I can't remember. Oh yeah, how many lines? I mean, you need to have at least 10 lines in this poem. Anything less and you haven't really had a good go. Yes, it's going to be difficult. Yes, it will make you think, but that doesn't give you an excuse to give up on this, okay? So I did this. It probably took me about 15 minutes to get that right. Yours might take you a little bit longer, but you haven't had much time in this lesson. You've only had 15 minutes plus 5 minutes on the questions, 20. Your lessons are meant to be at least 45 minutes, so that's 25 minutes, year 9. Have a go. As I said earlier, probably a couple of goes at this, a couple of drafts. to see how it goes. So that's like a rough one where you keep editing, crossing things out to get it right, and a neat version. And I look forward to seeing your confessions. That's what's going to be quite interesting here, I think. As I say, I've put my one out there. This is a true incident, which I am not proud of, and I definitely learnt my lesson for not being such an idiot in front of people again. And yeah, make sure you think about being ready for my live lesson on Friday. I'll let you know. Keep checking your emails. I've got 9 seconds. I'll check your emails because I'll definitely email you to let you know if it's going ahead. And thanks very much and see you soon. Bye-bye.